There's a lot to love about Chapter 3 and 4 of Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden. But if there's one thing that sort of feels off about these chapters, it is that they're more of an intermission into the main adventure than they're actually a part of it. So what I want to do in this video is that I'll go over Chapter 3 and 4 and how we can make them fit into the larger story of Rime of the Frostmaiden. So to anyone new here, my name is J.A. Vellynne and I'm with Eventyr Games, the adamantine best-selling publisher of several DM's resources, including DM's resources for Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden on the DM's Guild. What I'm doing in these videos is that I'm going over the chapters of Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden and offering my advice, tips and insight on how you can make the adventure easier for you to prepare for and run and more enjoyable and exciting for your players. I will refer to some things that I've mentioned in previous videos, but I'll make sure to leave some links and also briefly summarize whatever I've already said in another video. So with that out of the way, let's go into how we can make chapter 3 and 4, what I call the Duergar Plotline, fit in better with the main story of Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden. Alright, so as I see it, there's three main issues with how the Duergar plotline fits into the greater adventure. First off, there's how it ties to the story and specifically the main storyline that is Orwell's Everlasting Rime. Secondly, there's also the motivation for the characters to actually care about Duergar plotline and do something about it. And third, there's the whole transition between Chapter 1, 10 Towns, and Chapter 3 and 4, Sunblight and Light's Destruction, where I don't feel like we get a natural or perhaps always logical and timely transition from Chapter 1 to these two chapters. Alright, so without further ado, let's start with taking a look at tying the Duergar plotline closer to the main story. The way that we do this, or the way that I suggest that you do this, is by making the Duergar allies of the Frost Druids. Now, on the top level, you can have Orwell be sort of a deciding factor in the Duergar coming to the surface. Perhaps she had a hand in manipulating Sardarok to come to the surface, either through Asmodeus or directly. You can write Asmodeus out of the adventure and replace him with Orwell, so it's sort of more of a direct manipulation. Or it could be Orwell reaching out to Asmodeus saying Levistus and his servants, that would be Avaris, the wizard from the Arcane Brotherhood, has an interest in Icewind Dale, perhaps you should do something about it, and that leads Asmodeus to bring this Duergar to the surface and so on. The way I see it, Orwell's plans for 10 Towns is that she wants to prevent anyone from finding Ithrin's, and she also wants to drive the people of 10 Towns into desperation so they'll take up worship of her. And to that end, the Duergar can be an aid, because they could of course cause a lot of destruction, which could lead the people of 10 Towns to flock to Orwell and take up worship of her. Whether or not she intends for them to totally destroy 10 Towns with the Chartering Dragon is of course up to you. That could be something where perhaps their motivations aren't completely aligned, or their goals at least are not completely aligned. In any event, there's a tie between Orwell and the Duergar on a top level. On the lower level, we have the Frost Druids and we have the Duergar themselves. The way that I've described this alliance is that the Duergar are basically keeping tabs on the wizard from the Arcane Brotherhood for the Druids, while the Druids are helping the Duergar gather Charterland to build their dragon. Again, this is something I've gone over previously, so I'm going through it a bit fast, but there's basically 4 places where we could sort of foreshadow this alliance. In Lonelywood, we could have a catch of Charterland be present, which is going to Karkolohk in a few days when the characters arrive there. And then in Karkolohk, we could of course have them be waiting for this catch of Charterland, and also have a note from Nildar to himself explaining that he should remember to tell the Frostwood about the wizard he saw, that's Avaris, in Karkolohk. In Karkolohk, we can have Hethel, this elderly dwarf who gives a lot of exposition, also briefly tell the characters that there is an alliance between the Frost Druids and the Duergar. And in Easthaven, we could have some letters between Dirth and Uselm, a Frost Druid described briefly in Chapter 2, be present, where it details that Dirth has been keeping tabs on the wizards for the Frost Druids, helping them sink Naslantamir's ship, and also keeping them up to speed about Desan, the wizard that is being burned in Easthaven when the characters arrive there. Alright, with that out of the way, let's move on to the motivation. As it's written, the adventure seems to want the characters to discover the Duergar in Karkolohk or perhaps Karkolohk, and then move on to Easthaven, where they will of course encounter Dirth and find this map that will lead them to Sunblight Fortress. The book gives us an alternative way to present the Duergar plotline, and that is by having a speaker from one of the towns approach the characters, let them know about the Duergar threat, give them all the information, and then ask them to stop it. I think the first method is quite well laid out, and it's much preferable of course, but the second method works as well, except that both of these ways of discovering the Duergar plotline have a issue in common, and that issue is that there's no real motivation for the characters to do something about it. Now, if you have a party of bleeding heart paladins or just good heroes, they will of course jump at the chance to save all of 10 towns from a big dragon, but there are some parties that may just need a bit more motivation, or at least feel like they get something out of it. I think it's perfectly reasonable that the Council of Speakers, which is the collection of all the speakers from 10 towns, would offer a reward for the characters' aid in actually saving all the 10 towns, especially seeing that they're willing to offer several hundred gold pieces for much lesser tasks than this. So what you can do here is you can have the Council of Speakers meet, or just the speaker that approaches the party or the speaker they talk to, let the characters know that there will be a monetary reward if they can save 10 towns. The suggestion I have is that each of the smaller towns would promise 100 gold pieces, while each of the larger towns, that's Bryn Shander, East Haven, Targus, and Tourmaline, each can offer 300 gold pieces. And of course, the characters only get this gold if the town is not destroyed by the dragon. So this both creates a monetary motivation for the characters to actually go out and risk their lives to save 10 towns, and it also makes it so that while the dragon is attacking 10 towns, the characters will scramble to try and save as many towns as possible. Alright, lastly there's the whole transition from 10 towns chapter 1 to chapter 3 Sunblight and the fortress there. As mentioned previously, this is supposed to sort of happen organically, where the characters unravel the Duergar plotline, end up in East Haven, find the map, and then move out towards Sunblight Fortress. Now this would work fine, of course, except that I don't think that Sunblight works the best for 4th level characters. I think a party should be around 5th level for it to get the most enjoyment out of the whole Sunblight Fortress infiltration. And there's also very little room for content from chapter 2 if they have the characters moving directly from 10 towns to Sunblight without actually exploring just a bit of Icewind Dale first. This is something that I've gone over in the previous video about how you can tie in locations from chapter 2 and sort of use them to broaden out the adventure in the middle and get a lot of more of the exciting locations from chapter 2 actually crammed into the adventure. So what I'll do here is that I'll just expand upon that and show how you can use some of the locations to tie chapter 1 to chapter 3. The first thing you need to do, of course, is to make it so that the characters can't just move on their own from chapter 1 to chapter 3. You do this by taking away the map that the characters would otherwise find in East Haven and deciding that the Duergar don't know the directions to Sunblight Fortress. They're usually just fetched when they have to go there, or they're bad at navigating on the surface, or the Duergar the characters killed outside was actually the only Duergar who knew how to get to Sunblight Fortress. There's many ways to do this. The point is just that the characters can't move on to Sunblight Fortress on their own. They need to find someone who knows the way. So now the characters know that there's a dragon coming, but they don't know where it's coming from. We of course operating under the assumption that you have provided a motivation for the characters to actually want to do something about it. So the next that they will do is they'll try to find out where they can discover more. You can have a local character, someone who knows the area, realize an option or two on their own, or you can have NPCs that the character speaks to, whether that's a speaker or just the patrons down at the inn, offer up one or more of the following locations to the characters. Now, which locations should you choose? You can basically choose anything from chapter 2 as long as you can make it fit in and make it realistic that in this location the characters would get some aid in finding Sunblight Fortress. The locations that I think works best are Karkolohk, the Reghed Barbarians, and the Ascendant. So that's what I'll be going over in detail now. First off, the goblins from Karkolohk are a good choice because they, of course, would know the area, they would know Icewind Dale, and you can also perhaps decide that they have been selling Charterlin to the Duergar, they've been transporting over there when they find it, so that's sort of why they know about the Duergar. They've also put out a feeler for diplomacy with 10 towns, that's something that's described in the adventure, so it stands to reason that a speaker, perhaps in Bryn Shander, would know about the goblins and could tell the characters about them and offer them up as perhaps a way to find the fortress. You can more or less run the quest as it's written in the book, except that I don't think it works as well if you have the characters going in there trying to take the head off Yarbnock, the goblin's leader. So you can have them go there instead to just learn where the fortress is and perhaps make a diplomatic deal with the goblins. When they arrive, they'll be led to Yarbnock, where they can have a audience with him, and he decides that he wants to get out of Karkolohk, as is also described in the adventure, and if the characters can help him do that, he will of course lead them to the Duergar. On the way out, you can have a confrontation between Manefek, this goblin shaman that's suspicious of Yarbnock, and this could break into combat, and the characters will sort of have to choose a side. If Yarbnock dies during the combat, they can get the location of the fortress from one of the other goblins. Next up, we have the Reghed Barbarians, and much like the goblins, the barbarians would probably know where the fortress is simply by the virtue of being locals of Icewind Dale and knowing a lot about the terrain and what's going on. You could of course also have decided that they have been also selling Charterlin or transporting Charterlin to the Duergar, not knowing of course what they would use it for. I think there's two ways you can run this. You can use the Wolf Tribe Cannibals quest that's detailed in the book. The characters are told about this guide who can perhaps lead them to the fortress. When they go there, she says that you'll help them, but she wants them to first solve this issue with the Wolf Tribe Cannibals, and the characters can go there. And of course, if they can help out, they will get the directions to the fortress, or they can perhaps get the directions from someone else at the tribe if they decide to switch sides or handle the quest in a different way. Another way to do it is that you can have the characters discover the tribe on their own, or perhaps being led there by a local guide. When they get there, the barbarians don't know the directions to the fortress, but they may know where the characters can find out. So they can point the characters to a cave where they've seen Charterlin berserkers and Duergar also running around. The tribe can perhaps tell them that they've been attacked by crazed berserkers from these caves in the recent past, and that's of course also why they want the characters to go there and do something about it. When the characters get to this location, which is of course the Cave of the Berserkers, you can run it mostly as is written in the book, except that you can just throw in a body of a Duergar or two, and one of them of course has a map that can lead the characters to the Duergar fortress. You should of course note that as written, both the Wolf Tribe Cannibals quest and the Cave of the Berserkers could be a bit tough for 4th level characters. You may want to make some adjustments, pull away a Berserker or two, or perhaps half the number of tribal warriors that are in the Reghed Tribe, and so on. Lastly, we have the Ascendant, and here you can also use the quest that is detailed in the book, mostly as written. In essence, there's this small group of people in 10 towns that the characters may hear or know about that can help find the location of Sunblight Fortress. Perhaps Nars Beldrum can cast Divination, and Sylvester Hanging Bell can cast Locate Creature or Locate Object with an increased radius, which of course would be helpful in finding Sunblight Fortress. But before they can use these abilities, the distress signal coming from the Ascendant needs to be stopped. So these local psychics can point the characters to the Ascendant, the characters go there, they manage to stop the distress signal, and when they return to 10 towns, the psychic NPCs can sort of point the characters to Sunblight Fortress, and they're off to the races. Alright, so having gone over all this, I want to just briefly give an example of how you can use the information that I've just provided to sort of tie chapter 1 to chapter 3 and 4, which of course is the purpose of this video. Let's say that the characters went to Lonelywood first. Here they discovered the catch of Charterlin going to Karkolohk. They handled some other quests, but eventually find themselves in Karkolohk, ran into the Duergar there, also discovered that the Duergar has been communicating with the Frost Druids about the wizards from the Arcane Brotherhood, and that there's other Duergar present in Easthaven. Then they can go to Easthaven, confront Dearth aboard the Easthaven ferry, find more letters between the Frost Druids and the Duergar, and also discover that there's a dragon coming to destroy all of 10 towns and that the characters need to hurry. They take this information to Captain Imdra Arlegath, which they've already spoken to, or perhaps Imdra seeks them out after having heard about the chaos aboard the ferry earlier that day. In any event, the characters are quickly in communication with the officials, who of course take the threat from the Duergar and the dragon very seriously and want the characters to do something about it. So the speaker, Daneth Whelan, in Easthaven calls for a meeting of the Council of Speakers that convenes in a couple of days, and you can sort of put in a quest here or there from the other towns if you just want the characters to wrap up perhaps Dugan's Mead or Dugan's Hole and Good Mead, or other quests like that before the characters move on from chapter 1. In any event, the Council of Speakers convenes, they discuss, and then they call in the characters, lets them know that the people of 10 towns wants the characters to help stop this Duergar invasion, this dragon attack, and that they will offer them 100 gold pieces from each of the smaller towns and 300 gold pieces from the 4 larger towns, of course, depending on them not being destroyed by a dragon. You could have Speaker Duvessa Shane suggest that the characters seek out the goblins in Karkolohk, and you could have Speaker Daneth Whelan suggests that the characters seek out the psychics who may be able to help, and you can have Speaker Edgar Durmut from Dugan's Hole suggest that the characters seek out the Reghed Barbarians, who she believes would also know more about what's going on in Icewind Dale. In any event, the characters are now equipped with 3 locations where they can find out where Sunblight Fortress is, as well as a clear and concise motivation for why they want to go stop these Duergar to save 10 towns and also get a lot of gold, and a feeling that Chapter 3 and 4 are actually tied. The Duergar plotline is actually tied to the main story of the adventure. Alright, so I hope that summarizes my thoughts on how we can make the Duergar plotline sort of feel like an organic and integral part of the main adventure that is in Rime of the Frostmaiden. So yeah, that's it for me, and for this one I think that the next video will either be something about the locations in chapter 2 Icewind Dale, or perhaps a video on running chapter 3 and 4. If you have a preference there, you can also let me know about that in the comments below. But anyway, I hope that you have a great time running your Icewind Dale Rime of the Frostmaiden campaign, and that I'll see you in the next video.